Hello lovelies and welcome to today's video. Today we will be talking about Hecate. We will be discussing the history and origins of the goddess. We'll be touching on how she's evolved or devolved as a goddess and figure throughout the thousands and thousands of years of her existence. And we will also be dismantling the idea of what a dark goddess is through dismantling the patriarchy, Christianity, and even Greek patriarchal ideology. I'm also going to include links below in the description box for meditations and rituals that you can do concerning Hecate. So yeah, Hecate can be traced back to early Eastern European area, pre-Olympian Egypt as Hecate, or Hecate, however you want to pronounce it. A frog-headed goddess that represented motherhood and was the mother goddess, and every morning gave birth to the sun. She was the mother goddess who presided over all the various cycles of life: birth, death, rebirth, all of that. All positive things, nothing dark. I mean, you could see death as being dark. But she continued to be worshipped as Hecate in Eastern Europe until patriarchal influences happened, later on. But as that symbol for fertility, rebirth, transformation, death, and being this frog goddess, mother goddess. It wasn't until after the patriarchal Russian influence came in that she all of a sudden reappeared in the Amazonian and then Greek areas as Hecate, and this is when that name came about. However, there was patriarchal influences in the beginning of Hecate in the Greek mythology. And that's because there was some patriarchy there, just not as bad as it gets once the Christians come in. And at this time, they took a lot of the attributes that she had as just being this mother goddess who sees over birth, death, and rebirth and transformation and so many various things, basically being the triple goddess all in one as herself. Parts of what she did and was worshipped for got split off into different goddesses, such as Persephone and Demeter, etc. And then these powerful goddesses were eventually sent to the underworld. Prior to her being part of the Greek mythology, she was seen as a goddess of the heavens, of the sea. During her time being worshipped by the Amazonians, she was being matrona. I don't know what the right word would be, but she was being worshipped as this matriarchal, hierarchical being. They used her as a guide for being a strong woman and to follow her footsteps. And as we all know, the Amazonian women are known for their warrior strength. Now, going into Hecate as a Greek goddess, as many people acknowledge her as being, she can be seen as an elder, the crone, the queen of all witches, as many have said. She is the crone of the triple goddess figure. We can get wisdom and transformative insight from her. Later talk about with the crossroads is extremely important, and that's actually what's going to be linked below is meditations and rituals concerning crossroads. So she's also very attached to visualizations and personal growth. And that's been around since she was Hecate. So now, as the Greek goddess, she is now presiding over magic, ritual, prophetic visions, childbirth still, death still, and now added the underworld, the bearer of the secrets to regeneration and rebirth, which is still continuing from her days as a frog-headed goddess. Later on, when the Christians came about and started to change a lot of what the meaning of these goddesses who were so powerful stood for, they started saying how she was used only for satanic rites, and she was an old hag, not the crone, but an old hag. And that's when the idea of the underworld was seen as hell, when before it was just the place of the spirits. It was seen as darkness, which we will get into later on. At the end, I'm going to speak on darkness and how that has to do with the patriarchy. But again, this is only video 1 on Hecate. There'll be more in a couple months. So otherwise this would be another 30-minute video, and I'm really trying to limit having really long videos. Like Lilith, who we will be talking about next week, she is worshipped as a moon goddess, but the dark aspect of the moon. She's supposed to be the mirror of her cousin Artemis, who is to be the light aspect. So like the black and white Madonna, the dark light virgins. And Hecate was also supposed to be seen as a virgin goddess who never birthed, though there's variants on even the Greek mythology of who her parents were, though it's common that it's Perseus and Asteria that are her parents, but there are various other stories of who her parents were, and there's differences in a lot of how she ended up in the underworld, seeing as prior to the Greek time she was seen as a queen of the heavens, which was a different meaning than it became in the Judeo-Christian ideology. She's much like Isis and Lilith in various ways, who are two goddesses that I'll be talking about later on as well. I think right now would be a good time to kind of dismantle this idea of darkness before I go more into the stories of Hecate and what crystals and what herbs and everything else you can use for an altar for Hecate and whatever. So, since this is a video series on dismantling the patriarchal ideology and empowering ourselves, and this month being focused on goddesses is supposed to be about trying to find maybe a goddess that you can call upon, that if you don't have one that you really speak to a lot, or one that you may have never thought of actually reaching out to. So before I go any further, this whole idea of the darkness, it's much like Disney films, let's say. You have, here's Little Mermaid. You have Ursula, who represents everything that our society today deems to be bad in a woman, wrong in a woman. She's big, she's loud, she's obnoxious, she's strong, she doesn't need a man. And this fragile Ariel comes and is willing to give up everything to be with a man. Her beautiful singing voice, her legs, or her freedom underwater, 4 legs, I should say, all to be with a man that she's never even, really conversed with, okay? And she's supposed to be the one that we idolize. The same thing stands true with a lot of the goddesses and how their stories evolved, or rather devolved, over time during the rise of patriarchy, and then once we hit a Judeo-Christian, like, extreme override, okay? So you have Hecate and you have Persephone. Of course, Persephone also ends up going dark and staying in the underworld, but during her story, which is very closely tied to the holiday, or Sabbath, as we call it, Mabon, so Persephone gets lost, and at this time, in some versions of the story, I'm keeping it that, because again, there's so many different versions of the Greek stories. When I do my research, I've read so much on each of the goddesses that will be talked about in these videos. So yeah, there's many different folklores, but the one that I'm going to use for this, she at this point is still in the heavens and attached to the sea, as she was back when she was Hecate, something that's crossed over. She could hear the screams and cries of Persephone's mother. So she goes down to the underworld in search of her. So Persephone is seen as this young, vulnerable, naive, precious, still innocent girl. And Hecate is this powerful, strong, intense goddess, right? But what ends up happening, Persephone comes back, but she ends up going back down to the underworld and being with Hades, of all people. And Hecate stays, for the most part, in the underworld as her guide, and then the guide for the other spirits, because Hecate also is a goddess for necromancy and spirits and stuff, which came later on, but we'll get to that later. So she becomes basically the wise woman guide to Persephone. Now, obviously, the story of Ariel and Ursula, there is no close relationship, but at the end, but the story is very much the same in the sense that these are vulnerable, innocent women who, like, have to go through a change. So why are we seeing Hecate and Ursula in this case as these dark, negative figures? Because that's what we're taught, that powerful woman is bad, and we make Hecate look like this old, wrinkly hag, and Ursula this ugly, big, fat woman who just hates men. But really, what's happening with these dark goddesses or dark queens in the Disney thing is, whether they are fully bad or are like Hecate, where there's these variants, they are essentially evolving the female, the young woman. They're bringing her into womanhood. It's the stories are a metaphor for bringing them into womanhood. And of course, Ariel does not go into full womanhood. She goes into the womanhood in which our society wants. But with Persephone, that's not fully the case. So we need to stop thinking of these dark goddesses or even dark queens as Snow White, I think, is a better example, or the Snow Queen story. But anyways, it doesn't matter. The point is, with Hecate, that she personifies everything that the male patriarchal system and society and culture, whatever, hates. And we don't want to talk about a woman's sexuality. We don't want to talk about a woman going through their adolescence and maturing and becoming a woman. We just figure, you're innocent one day and then you become an adult and then you end up having kids of your own and creating your own innocence. We don't want to talk about the battle and struggles and facing our own inner demons. That's what these metaphorical stories with these dark goddesses and dark queens are all about. So that's a deconstruction of the dark goddess. And we'll do even more in the video on Lilith next week. For sure. That video is all about doing that. I have so many different instances. But yeah, that's all I have on the Hecate thing. So the idea of the underworld was not seen as like a world of demons and hell and all that until the Judeo-Christian patriarchial whatever. Though, like I did mention before, the Greeks were a little more, already had a little bit of patriarchy in their system and their society and their culture already, as did the Romans with their goddesses and stuff, versus ancient Egypt and other in that area, and as well as the Amazonian. So we already were seeing there being a separation of kind of a good evil thing, but both still served a purpose, right? This was where you go when you die. It's not necessarily evil or dark, it's just the place of the souls, of the spirits. Getting back into some of the positives, or rather representations or things that Hecate does. She sees the past, the present, and the future, and can be called upon in our time when we need to make wise decisions and good choices, hence the crossroads. So once she became involved more so with being in the underworld and being a goddess of the underworld, one of her responsibilities was being the guardian of souls, which, again, as I said before, that is not a bad thing. That is not a demon. That is not like hell or anything. But over time, as patriarchy became more entrenched, and then eventually Christianity, this idea of just being a goddess that was the guardian of the souls that led you to your next phase in life and then rebirth and all that, she became a Hague figure, as I mentioned before, instead of just being the crone of the triple moon figure, and what became shadowy and dark and scary, and she was sent out with the demons and taught sorcery and satanic evil witchcraft. And she showed up at tombs of people that were murdered, and she would show up at the crossroads, and it was no longer because she can help you make decisions or that she's, you know, the goddess of transformation. Oh no, it's because she goes to the crossroads because then she can scare you and kill you and come and get you at your most vulnerable. And the underworld itself had became a place called hell, which was unending torture, and Hecate was there to guide you on your unending torture. So instead of her being somebody that's a protecting goddess, a guiding goddess, which is what she did for Persephone, she is now seen as this evil demoness who just sucks the life out of you and brings you down to her hell. Again, another thing of Hecate was wisdom and experiences with relationships and lessons in life and having that all-knowing knowledge, which, oh no, according to patriarchy and Christianity, that's God or whoever's the president or whatever white male's like pretty much leading your life. So a wise woman, an old crone, this queen of witches telling us what to do? No, that's not good. We can't do that. Because she knows death and doesn't fear it, and tries to teach us that it's a positive experience and it's just another stage in life, right? Yeah, we gotta change that too. So, because our society prefers the young, youthful, we don't like the crones. We like the Persephones. We like the young ones. So, they got rid of the aspect later on during this rise in patriarchy and Christianity of her being a goddess of rebirth, birth, and death. Now she's only a demoness of death, because the rebirth and the renewals and the birthing has to stay with the young, beautiful goddesses, not this old wise woman. This in turn devalues our ability as women to have knowledge and introspection into our own selves and our own growth, and to ask our inner voice and our inner guide for answers, or for us to look to older women for answers. Instead, we, again, devalue them. We put them lower than they should be. We think of them as, oh, this poor old woman, and try and take care of them. So if we go back to what Hecate really is, we can get rid of the idea of being old and dying as a bad idea. She is a goddess of all transformations, all parts of life, all aspects of the world, not just the underworld. She was of the heavens. She was of the sea. She was everything. Of the moon. She was a goddess of the moon. She originated as a goddess that gave birth to the sun every morning. So when you hear about these horrible stories that come out now about Hecate, think back to her history and put it all together. With that, we've also been taught as women that going on a self journey, going on this introspection and figuring out who we are as individuals and not just what we're supposed to be, is part of that devaluation of Hecate. And we're stuck in this like weird middle ground limbo thing, and it's like we're not fully prepared for adulthood, and we're supposed to try and stick to that Ariel all our lives and be youthful all our lives instead of being a wise, strong woman. Why is it so wrong that I'm an outspoken, need to be a know-it-all type woman? Because that is what we've been taught by deconstructing what these women are. Instead, we should be, when we have that time for self-journey and introspection, we should be taking it. And Hecate invites us to. She can act as our guide in this deep inner work. Do like shadow work. I know a lot of pagans, Wiccans, whatever have you, have a little bit of a problem with shadow work and see it as like a dark arts. But again, don't make me go back into my whole theory of darkness, because you're going to hear a different take on it in the Lilith and maybe the Isis Hathor video too. So take Hecate by the hand and let her guide you on your way to the next stage of your life. We must face the dark goddess. As I mentioned before, darkness is not a bad thing. Facing the darkness, remember, it's always darkest before the dawn. Hello, darkness, my old friend. All of it, we have to face the darkness, and that's what I was trying to get to with the Little Mermaid and the Persephone story, is that the view of darkness is skewed in those stories. We need to surrender to the darkness and to Hecate so that we as women, as people, as witches, as spiritual beings can be reborn. And a lot of times we might not fully give in. We might start and then get too fearful of confronting our own inner demons. The only darkness, the only demons that are confronted when working with Hecate are our own, not her. So it's an experience that we need to do. She is also representative of the burning times, of the witch trials, and that, why I'm bringing that up is because of the crone image, how Christian patriarchy turned it into this old hag. Most of the women that were prosecuted and burned or hung or fire squad were older women, wise women, because that's how things were. I mean, whether they were actually practicing or not, they were known as the wise women, you know, using old herbal medicinal healing practices. And they were usually old women that didn't have any family left. Again, whether they actually practiced or not, didn't matter. And then lived, you know, in a cottage by themselves, and they were prosecuted. So that kind of gives you an answer as to why this transition of who Hecate is occurred, or like kind of explains it more. Okay, so to sum it up, she is the mother of the gods. She is the goddess of the earth and the sea and the heavens. She is the guardian, the female guardian of the underworld and the guide of the underworld, the goddess of the underworld, the queen of the dead, the queen of ghosts. She is the goddess of necromancy, the goddess of the crossroads and gates, goddess of sorcery and magic, goddess of the witches. She is also a light bringer. She is the leader. She is the mother goddess, which goes along with the mother of the gods. She is the goddess of fertility, birth, death, transformation, and rebirth. She also has a companion who is a three-headed dog named Sirius. I hope I pronounced that right, because I'm a reader. And with that, I'm going to go into a shortened version of a table of correspondence, so to speak, things for an altar for Hecate. And yeah, let's get to it. So symbols are the crossroads, the Trinity symbol, a light, like a torch light, the three-headed statue, and a cauldron. Animals, frogs, dogs, bats, owls, snakes. Let's see. The element for her is earth. She's obviously the dark moon. Crystals, moonstone, black tourmaline, hematite, and black onyx. My favorite. I just happen to have it on me. And some herbs are mugwort, myrrh, cinnamon. There's more, but that's just some. And foods that you can use as offering are raisins, pomegranates. Pomegranates tend to be very much associated with the underworld. And wine, honey, and milk. Next week will be on Lilith, which is going to be pretty intense. Like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, which I don't know why you haven't. There's also a Facebook group for embracing your inner goddess that you can join, which I'll put below. I also have a new Twitter that I started a couple months ago that I'm just now getting really active on. I'll put that below, and all my other stuff, Instagram, Facebook, store, all of it. Please check everything out. Again, like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the Lilith video. I love you all, and go have some fun with Hecate. Go on a journey.